Dr. Jasmine Torres pulled her worn cardigan tighter around her shoulders as she settled into her workstation at the Meridian Deep Space Observatory. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly beyond the facility's windows, painted silver under a canopy of stars that most people never bothered to truly see. But for Jasmine, those distant points of light represented infinite possibilities, countless worlds that might harbor life among the cosmic silence. At 32, she had spent nearly a decade of her life listening to the universe's whispers. Her colleagues often joked that she spoke better to aliens than to humans. And honestly, Jasmine couldn't argue with that assessment. People were complicated, unpredictable, often disappointing. Stars, however, were reliable. They followed patterns, obeyed physics, and never broke your heart by choosing career advancement over shared dreams. Tonight felt different, though. She couldn't explain why. The usual array of radio telescopes hummed their electronic lullabies, while data streams cascaded across her monitors like digital waterfalls. Most of what they captured was cosmic background radiation, the dying echoes of stellar explosions, or interference from Earth's own satellites. After years of practice, Jasmine could distinguish between genuine, deep space phenomena and terrestrial noise pollution with the same ease most people used to recognize familiar songs. Her coffee had long grown cold when the anomaly appeared on her primary display. At first, she assumed it was equipment malfunction, perhaps a glitch in the signal processing software. But after running 3 separate diagnostic checks, the impossible remained stubbornly real. The transmission originated from somewhere beyond Earth's atmosphere, but unlike any natural celestial radio source in their extensive databases, what made Jasmine's pulse quicken was the patterned structure. These weren't random electromagnetic bursts or pulsar rhythms. The signal repeated specific sequences with mathematical precision, prime numbers arranged in ascending order, followed by the Fibonacci sequence, then something that looked suspiciously like geometric theorems. More intriguing still, when she checked the logs, these patterns had begun appearing exactly 47 minutes after the observatory's routine deep space transmission test earlier that evening. Someone or something was answering back. Hands trembled slightly as she initiated the observatory's response protocol. She transmitted a simple mathematical sequence, just basic addition problems that any intelligence should recognize. Then she waited, her breath caught somewhere between anticipation and disbelief. The response came within minutes. Not only did the mysterious sender solve her equations, but they added increasingly complex mathematical concepts. Calculus, advanced geometry. Eventually, binary representations of simple images, circles, squares, representations of planetary systems. As dawn painted the desert mountains in shades of rose and gold, Dr. Jasmine Torres realized she was conducting humanity's first genuine conversation with an extraterrestrial intelligence. Her heart raced with the magnitude of the discovery, but also with something else entirely, a strange sense of connection that felt almost personal, as if whoever was out there among the stars was reaching across the vast emptiness of space, specifically to find her. Prince Kelvin of the Luminary Empire had never experienced true solitude until his escort fleet was torn apart by the gravitational storms near the Terran system. For someone who had lived 400 years surrounded by the constant mental harmonies of his telepathic people, the silence inside his damaged escape pod felt like a form of death. His luminescent skin, normally a proud display of silver and azure that shifted with his emotions, had dimmed to barely more than a pale glow. The elegant features that marked him as luminary royalty, high cheekbones, large violet eyes, and the distinctive crystalline formations that grew from his temples like a natural crown seemed almost ghostly in the pod's emergency lighting. The diplomatic mission to broker peace between the Luminari Empire and the Obsidian Collective had been his life's greatest responsibility. As the youngest prince in 5 centuries to be granted ambassadorial status, Kelvin possessed a rare gift among his people, the ability to understand and communicate with species whose thought patterns differed drastically from luminary mental structures. This talent made him invaluable for interspecies negotiations. but useless when trapped alone near a primitive world whose inhabitants couldn't even achieve faster-than-light travel. His long-range communications array lay twisted and dead, destroyed when asteroid debris punctured his ship's hull. Navigation systems flickered sporadically, providing conflicting readings that left him uncertain of his exact position. The rescue beacon's power cells were failing, and even if they weren't, no luminary vessels would be searching for survivors. This far from their intended route, that left only one option: the electromagnetic chatter emanating from the blue-green world. Below, Kelvin had studied this species during his diplomatic training. Humans, they called themselves. Their civilization was barely 5,000 years old, still confined to their single world, still using primitive chemical rockets and crude radio waves. By luminary standards, they were little more than intelligent animals. Yet as his survival situation grew more desperate, these primitive radio transmissions represented his only hope for rescue. Using his pod's damaged but functional short-range transmitters, Kelvin began broadcasting basic mathematical sequences toward the planet's surface. He chose concepts that any developing intelligence should recognize: prime numbers, geometric relationships, universal constants. If these humans possessed even rudimentary scientific knowledge, they might notice his signals and respond. To his surprise, they did. The response came from what his sensors indicated was a large radio telescope facility in the planet's northern desert regions. Whoever was operating the equipment possessed genuine intelligence. Answering his mathematical queries with increasingly sophisticated responses, more intriguingly, there seemed to be something almost personal in the exchanges. For Kelvin transmitted cold mathematical precision, the human operator added subtle variations, creative flourishes that served no logical purpose, but somehow made the communications feel more alive. Over the following days, their exchanges grew more complex. The human began transmitting binary-coded images, representations of their world, their solar system, even simple artistic patterns that seemed designed purely for aesthetic pleasure. Kelvin found himself responding with similar images from his own experiences: the crystal cities of Luminara, the aurora-like energy fields that danced between gas giant moons, the geometric patterns that represented different emotional states. In Luminari culture, for the first time since his ship was destroyed, Kelvin felt something other than despair. This unknown human possessed a curiosity and creativity that reminded him why he had chosen diplomatic service over the comfortable isolation of royal court life. Their communications had become less about potential rescue and more about genuine connection. Two minds reaching across impossible distances to understand each other. When he finally transmitted coordinates for a meeting location on the planet's surface, Kelvin realized he was taking an unprecedented risk. No member of Luminari royalty had ever made direct contact with such a primitive species. But as he prepared to materialize his physical form on the alien world below, he found himself more excited than afraid. The coordinates led Jasmine to a stretch of desert she had never explored. Despite living near these badlands for over a decade, red sandstone formations jutted from the earth like ancient monuments, their surfaces carved smooth by millennia of wind and rare desert rains. She parked her dusty Honda Civic beside a cluster of Joshua trees and checked her equipment one final time: portable radio transmitter, emergency supplies, and a camera that probably wouldn't capture anything useful if this encounter proved as extraordinary as she hoped. The rational part of her mind kept insisting this was an elaborate hoax orchestrated by her graduate school colleagues. But the mathematical complexity of their exchanges had grown far beyond anything her peers could devise. Besides, some of the astronomical data embedded in the aliens' transmissions referenced stellar phenomena that wouldn't be visible from Earth for another several years, information that no human database currently contained. As the sun descended toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of amber and crimson, Jasmine began to question her sanity. She was a respected scientist, not some conspiracy theorist chasing UFO fantasies in remote locations. What would she tell her supervisor if this turned out to be nothing more than an elaborate practical joke? How would she explain driving 3 hours into the wilderness, based on radio signals that might have originated from a particularly creative ham radio operator. Then the air began to shimmer. It started as subtle distortion, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, but perfectly circular and expanding slowly. Jasmine climbed down from her car hood where she had been sitting, her heart hammering against her ribs. The shimmer intensified, taking on an opalescent quality that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. A figure began to materialize within the distortion. Jasmine's first thought was that nothing in her scientific training had prepared her for this moment. Her second thought was that the being appearing before her was undeniably beautiful, but in a way that made her breath catch with something approaching recognition, as if some deep part of her had been waiting her entire life to see exactly this. The alien stood roughly her height, with a slender, graceful build that suggested both strength and elegance. His skin possessed a luminescent quality that shifted between silver and pale blue, and delicate crystalline formations grew from his temples, like a natural crown. But it was his eyes that captured her attention, large and violet, filled with an intelligence that seemed both ancient and surprisingly gentle. For several heartbeats, they simply stared at each other across the desert sand. Jasmine found herself cataloging details with scientific precision, even as her emotional mind reeled with the impossibility of the situation.
Ow.
The alien's clothing appeared to be made from some kind of adaptive material that flowed like liquid metal, but held the structure of fabric. His movements carried an unconscious grace that spoke of nobility or high social status. Finally, she managed to raise her hand in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful greeting. The alien tilted his head slightly, studying her gesture with obvious curiosity, then slowly raised his own hand in response. When he spoke, his voice resonated not through the air, but directly in her mind, musical and warm despite its alien origin. "You are the intelligence who has been communicating with me through electromagnetic transmissions," he said, each word carefully formed as if he was translating from another language entirely. "I am called Kelvin, Prince of the Luminary Empire. I am grateful for your willingness to make contact." Jasmine found her voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. "I'm Dr. Jasmine Torres, and I think this might be the most important moment in human history." Above them, the first stars began appearing in the darkening sky, silent witnesses to a meeting that would forever change to beings from worlds separated by impossible distances. As the desert evening settled around them, Jasmine realized that her life as she knew it had just ended, and something infinitely more complex and wonderful was about to begin. 3 weeks had passed since their first meeting, and Jasmine had developed an elaborate system of lies to explain her frequent absences from the observatory. She told her supervisor she was conducting atmospheric interference studies that required extended fieldwork, which was technically true if you considered alien technology a form of atmospheric interference. Her colleagues accepted the explanation without question. Jasmine had always been the type to disappear into research projects for days at a time. Their daily meetings had evolved into something that felt simultaneously like scientific collaboration. In the most meaningful friendship of Jasmine's life, Kelvin had managed to partially cloak his escape pod near their usual meeting spot, rendering it invisible to human detection, while providing him with shelter and the basic necessities his physiology required. Unlike humans, he didn't need food in any conventional sense, but instead absorbed energy directly from various sources: stellar radiation, electromagnetic fields, and something he called emotional resonance from other living beings. "Your species generates remarkably intense emotional energy," he had mentioned during one of their work sessions. His crystalline crown flickering with what Jasmine had learned indicated curiosity. Most developing civilizations emit only basic life force, but humans seem to experience feelings with unusual depth and complexity. It's quite fascinating to observe. Working together to repair his long-range communication array had revealed how perfectly their different approaches complemented each other. Jasmine's intuitive problem-solving and creative thinking paired beautifully with Kelvin's vast technical knowledge and precise understanding of quantum mechanics. Where she saw possibilities, he understood limitations. Where he calculated probabilities, She imagined solutions that shouldn't work, but somehow did. The communication device taking shape in the small cave they had converted into a workshop represented a fusion of human ingenuity and luminary technology, using Earth's synthetic crystal manufacturing techniques. Combined with Kelvin's ability to manipulate matter at the molecular level, they were creating something that theoretically shouldn't be possible: a quantum entanglement communicator, capable of sending messages instantaneously across interstellar distances. But as their collaboration progressed, Jasmine began to notice changes in herself that had nothing to do with scientific discovery. She found herself looking forward to their meetings with an intensity that surprised her. During her regular shifts at the observatory, she caught herself thinking about Kelvin's stories of crystal cities floating in gas-giant atmospheres, of beings made of pure energy who danced between stars, of ancient civilizations that had transcended physical form entirely. More troubling were her dreams. Night after night, she found herself wandering through impossible landscapes under alien suns, always with a luminescent figure beside her, showing her wonders beyond human imagination. "Jasmine," Kelvin said one evening, as they calibrated the quantum resonance patterns in their makeshift device, "I must share something with you about my people's emotional experiences." She looked up from the crystal matrix she had been adjusting, noting the subtle dimming of his natural luminescence that indicated uncertainty or discomfort. "Luminari typically maintains strict emotional control," he continued. "Our relationships serve specific purposes: political alliances, genetic compatibility, shared intellectual pursuits. We do not form what you humans call personal attachments, simply for the pleasure of another's company." Jasmine felt something cold settle in her stomach. And that's a problem because since beginning our communications, I have experienced what I can only describe as anticipation regarding our meetings, excitement about sharing discoveries with you, and something my translation matrices identify as affection that extends beyond practical collaboration. Violet. Eyes met hers directly, and Jasmine saw something there that made her heart race with possibilities and terror in equal measure. "I believe," he said quietly, "that I am developing what your species calls emotional attachment, despite my diplomatic training and the responsibilities I bear to my people." Jasmine stared at him, her scientific mind cataloging the implications. While her heart leaped with joy she had no right to feel. Above them, the stars continued their ancient dance, oblivious to the fact that two beings from different worlds were discovering that the universe's greatest mystery wasn't hidden in distant galaxies, but in the inexplicable connection forming between two hearts, learning to understand each other across impossible differences. The quantum communicator came online at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night, filling their cave workshop with a harmonic resonance that made Jasmine's teeth ache and caused Kelvin's crystalline crown to blaze with brilliant light. After weeks of careful construction and calibration, their impossible hybrid of human technology and luminary engineering had successfully established contact with the broader galaxy. "The signal is stabilizing," Kelvin reported, his luminous hands dancing over the device's crystalline control matrix. "I'm receiving response patterns from a luminary rescue fleet. They've been searching for survivors from my diplomatic mission." Jasmine should have felt triumphant. Their success represented a breakthrough that would revolutionize human understanding of physics, communication, and humanity's place in the cosmic community. Instead, she felt hollow, as if someone had carved out her chest and replaced her heart. With cold stone, success meant Kelvin would leave. Success meant the end of everything that had made her life meaningful for the past month. "That's wonderful," she managed, trying to inject enthusiasm into her voice. "Your people must be relieved to know you're alive. In those peace negotiations you mentioned, maybe there's still time to salvage them." Kelvin, its natural luminescence, dimmed to barely more than starlight. Over their weeks together, Jasmine had learned to read these subtle changes in his appearance like facial expressions. Right now, he looked as conflicted as she felt. "Yes," he said slowly, his mental voice lacking conviction. "My duty to the Luminary Empire must take precedence. The war between my people and the Obsidian Collective has claimed millions of lives. Every day I remain missing increases the likelihood that peace negotiations will fail permanently. Even as he spoke about duty and responsibility, his violet eyes kept drifting to Jasmine. And she could feel the weight of everything they weren't saying hanging between them like a physical presence. The rescue fleet will arrive within 3 of your days, he continued. I should use this time to compile reports about your species, document Earth's technological capabilities, prepare formal recommendations for future diplomatic contact. Should, Jasmine repeated, but not want to? Kelvin's form flickered with the complex light patterns she had learned indicated deep emotional turbulence. Jasmine, my people do not typically experience the kind of individual attachments that define human relationships. We form connections based on shared purpose, cosmic harmony, collective benefit. Personal desires are considered dangerous distractions from higher duties. Jasmine felt tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. So when your rescue ship arrives, we go back to being strangers, like none of this ever happened? That would be the logical course of action, he said, but his voice carried no conviction whatsoever. The next 2 days passed in a blur of bittersweet intensity. They spent hours together, ostensibly working on documentation and preparing for Kelvin's departure, but really just absorbing each other's presence like survivors hoarding precious resources. Jasmine showed him more of human culture, poetry that served no practical purpose except to make people feel less alone. Music that existed purely to create beauty, art that captured emotions too complex for words. Kelvin shared deeper glimpses of luminary civilization, cities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, art forms that involved manipulating the fabric of space-time itself, philosophical concepts that human language couldn't adequately express. But more than that, he shared pieces of himself that no other human had ever seen. Fears about living up to his royal bloodline, dreams of exploring unknown regions of the galaxy, the loneliness of bearing responsibility for entire civilizations. On the final night before his rescue fleet's arrival, they sat together on a ridge overlooking the desert valley where they had first met. The Milky Way stretched overhead in all its glory, a river of light containing billions of worlds, countless civilizations, infinite possibilities. I have a choice to make, Kelvin said quietly, his luminescence reflecting off the sandstone around them. I could return to my duties, fulfill my obligations to my people, and spend the next few centuries wondering what might have been, or ... He turned to face her directly, and Jasmine saw something in his violet eyes that made her breath catch. Or I could choose something my people would consider incomprehensible. I could choose love over duty, personal connection over cosmic responsibility, the happiness of one human woman over the political stability of galactic civilizations. Jasmine's heart hammered against her ribs. What are you saying? I'm saying that in 400 years of existence, nothing has ever felt as important to me as these past few weeks with you. I'm saying that the thought of leaving Earth, of never seeing you again, feels like a form of death I'm not prepared to accept. Above them, a new star appeared in the familiar constellation patterns, growing brighter as Kelvin's rescue fleet approached. Soon he would have to choose between the vast responsibilities of his birthright and the simple, impossible dream of building a life with someone whose existence was measured in decades rather than centuries. As the alien vessel descended toward their desert meeting place, Jasmine reached for Kelvin's luminous hand, and together they prepared to discover whether love could truly transcend the distances between worlds. The rescue ship's landing lights illuminated the desert like artificial dawn, but neither of them moved from their ridge. Whatever choice lay ahead, they would face it together, two hearts that had found each other across the infinite darkness of space and refused to let the universe tear them apart.